I'll just start off with, hi Chris, thanks for your time today. Normally, I'd start off with reading through people's LinkedIn bio, but I want to try something a little bit different. You're obviously a property professional. How would you introduce yourself? What should people know about you and your background?
What a great question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So my name's Chris. I'm the co-founder of UK Homes Network. I would best describe myself as probably a property marketer or a property professional with experience in marketing. I think that's the best way to round it up. But I've had quite a bit of experience doing a number of different roles within the industry. So I've got quite a sort of unique view into not just the sort of residential resale market, but also the new build and property development side of things.
Nice. Well, the main objective, obviously what we want to talk about today, is your venture into creating a social platform for property, and the event that you're organising soon to help to promote it and raise the awareness. Before we get into that, what would you, as a summary, and I'll dig into it a little bit deeper, I'm curious, like, what got you to this point in your career? So, like, had you always been in property? You said more from the marketing side, but what would you say has led you to this point? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it feels like quite a shift. Like, not many people go and start a social media platform.
Yeah.
So what's led you to this point in your career?
A lot of trauma. No, I'd say I've always been sort of like interested in property. And my first ever job, so I left college, and my first ever job was working, did a bit of work experience in local surveyors. And they had me basically doing the ring binders and putting all the home buyers reports together. And I was so crap at it, because it was basically on one of these ring binders, and would go through about 30 reports just because I'd put the holes in the wrong place or the ring binder would be out of place. But I was actually reading the survey reports, and I was much more fascinated by the properties. So anyway, fast forward a couple of years, and I was looking for a job, and my dad, who was an estate agent in the 80s, found a local estate agents looking for sales negotiators. And he said, well, mate, why don't you give that a try? Because that might be up your street. So yeah, ventured into estate agency, absolutely loved it from day one. But it was a bit of it wasn't sort of the standard way to get into estate agency. Within my first week, there was only two of us in the branch. So my manager and myself, and he was supposed to be, I was supposed to be shadowing him basically. And within 2 days of me being there, so 48 hours into my first week, his wife went into labour and basically chucked the keys at me and said, I'm going on paternity leave for 2 weeks. So for a nervous 4 or 5 hours, I was in the office by myself answering calls, not really knowing what to do. And then the managing director came over, and I got sort of to learn the trade from that. So yeah, in terms of estate agency, absolutely loved it. But I think every estate agent has a sell-by date. And I quite dramatically hit my sell-by date. I was burnt out, had a mental breakdown, and decided that I needed sort of to shift my career ever so slightly. And one of the things that I picked up in my time in estate agency was that if you're going out to evaluation, most people, most estate agents are going in there and going, yeah, we'll put you on Rightmove, we'll put you on Zoopla, we'll put you on prime location. And the best thing about us as an estate agency is that we offer the best service. And you're like, right, what the hell does that mean? And the customer doesn't necessarily know. The estate agent doesn't necessarily know, but they're just trying to prove that they're going to look after them. Whereas I'd had time at a hybrid estate agency, and they were actually putting a full marketing report for them, and they were actually delving into the psychology of why buyers interact with certain properties. So, for example, they would list their properties between 6 and 10 p.m. The reason that they do that is because 70% of the traffic on Rightmove is between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m.
So you put it live at that point, and that's really, so even though the property is going to be there for obviously an extended period of time, when you put it on, had an effect on whether or not it was going to get seen at the right.
Yeah, 100%, because the impressions. So basically what you're doing is you're leaning on Rightmove's mailing service. So Rightmove will send out a mailer to anyone that has those requirements based on that property type. So if you imagine you're sat at home, you put the kids to bed, you're having a glass of wine, and suddenly you get an email through that a property's hit the market that hits your requirement. You're much more in a position then to go and check that out. Get the tablet out, get the laptop out, get your phone out, and actually check that property out. Have that discussion with your partner and decide whether you want to view it the next day. So that change in psychology and actually presenting that to, a potential vendor was eye-opening for me. I was like, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I want to get into. Yeah. So I started to explore a little bit more down the marketing route, and specifically more digital marketing. So, cut a long story short, spent a year out, went and travelled for a year, lived in Holland, travelled sort of around Northern Europe, had a great time. And when I came back, I realised that digital marketing, or specifically marketing, was where I wanted to be, and working not... The biggest fear I had was losing all that property knowledge that I'd accrued over that time. So the best thing for me was to work in marketing in the property industry. So, yeah, this is around the houses, if you'll pardon the pun, but essentially that's where my experience came with, professional experience came with digital marketing. But while I was in the estate agency, when I was working for local branches, I was the guy that was handed the social media to look after. And we started generating quite a high number of instructions just from promoting our personal brand, promoting the brand of the estate agency. So I already had that experience under my belt. Anyway, fast forward to probably the last 3 years. I was working for a large prop tech company. Me and my brother were working together there, where I basically launched a community-based platform for that prop tech software. We grew to about 2,500 members. It's fantastic, but the membership, we're always concerned it was a bit of an upsell to the main product, and it was only ever available to those customers, the ones that were paying the most amount of money. And when myself and my brother David were made redundant literally 3 weeks before Christmas, I'd already sort of decided that this was the route that we needed to go down, because social media is so underutilized in the property industry. Particularly when we have so much to talk about, but also property professionals that are dealing in property investment, landlords, developers, they only really want to network with other property professionals that understand the pain points of what they do, but also have the resources to help them out. So if we created a truly independent platform, a social media platform, that cut out the noise of platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook, where basically anyone can wade in on a property related conversation, and keeps it specifically for the industry to share knowledge and network with each other more effectively, we could create a really, really viable alternative to some of the major platforms.
Before we go into the actual platform itself, because obviously that's an in-depth conversation in itself.
Yeah,
I'm curious a little bit about what you were saying, some of those aspects. I don't need obviously details on your personal struggles, like we're not going. But I'm curious. I've never heard. You're the first person that said to me that estate agents have a sell-by date.
Yeah.
What aspect of that would you say is the hardest thing? What would you say causes that burnout for someone in that industry?
The British public.
No, I'm not joking. I'm laughing because I've no doubt. Like when you're doing B2C, people can be a nightmare, especially when they don't understand it. It puts a lot of pressure on yourself.
Well, estate agents have a really bad rap anyway. Okay. So I'd say probably 70% of the time I'm going into a property to do a valuation on their home, their back's up against the wall because they view me as an estate agent. And I'll be honest, the uniform that I wore as a local estate agent didn't help. It was a 3-piece suit, completely branded. I looked like I was an air hostess. I had slick back, greasy hair, and I was just not the image of... I was the classic image of, sort of an estate agent. But when I was going into people's homes, I wasn't able to break down that barrier of I'm a real person and I'm here to help you out in terms of sell your house. And that's the perception that the British public have against most estate agents. I know that the industry has modernized slightly now, and that, there's some fantastic estate agents doing some amazing work, and especially around their personal branding. But immediately when you go into a living room, they think this estate agent's trying to shaft me here. because as we know, estate agents are ranked against bankers, parking attendants, and all the rest of it. So the general opinion of estate agents is not very high. So when you're going into that conversation, they're immediately prepared to fight you on whatever conversation you're having. Plus, I have a big problem with problems like location. Kirsty and Phil, working with the general public on how to buy a property, and they're telling them, you should purchase a property, you should offer 50 to 100 grand below asking price. And if you watch them, they sit in a pub and they never actually get the deal done. It's very rare you see Kirsty and Phil get the deal done, but they'll go hard on the negotiation. And that's kind of a perception that the public have, is that you can sort of really negotiate hard with estate agents, and then that creates a really bad impression with your client, is the vendor.
Yeah.
So there's this constant cycle of like what an estate agent actually does and how they're perceived by the British public. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult to cut through with people and get them to see that you are a real person and you're here to do a great job.
Yeah, because it seems like you set up almost to be forced into that situation where, because of people's perception of the industry, they're going in almost viewing you as the enemy in a way, because they've got to combat you. That's really interesting. So would you say, because I mean, when you're dealing with the general public as if you being the client, that comes with, like, working with clients can be a challenge anyway. Would you say then did you feel like empathetical about this, or did you just get really worn down with people constantly back and forth?
Yeah, so you see the best and worst in humanity when you're going out to these living rooms. So I mean, there were certain dire situations where you're desperate to help these people. And maybe I'm a bit too nice. I charge them next to no fee just to try and get them moving on and, help them out. I wasn't particularly commercially minded back then, but, if I saw someone in need of help, and particularly when you're talking about a property, which is their biggest asset, is probably where the most capital's tied up, you want to help someone. But then again, you also see the worst in humanity. So I dealt with a lot of repossessions. I used to joke with my mates, if it stinks of piss, think of Chris. Like, because that was my bread and butter. I used to love dealing with, like, really run-down properties and then working with the developers or with the landlords. But then you get into these repossessions, and I joined luckily after the time where bailiffs would attend on their own with a locksmith. So it used to be that the estate agent would attend, and the estate agent would go into the property with the bailiffs, and the horror stories that I've heard from my colleagues in terms of what they saw. But then you've got the aftermath of that. So even though the estate agent no longer goes in with a bailiff, you see how these properties are left. And I'm talking animal cruelty cases, child cruelty and child abuse cases. Yeah. I've had blood on the walls, spelling out the word help as if it's The Shining. And that's just the repossessions. Then you look at sort of your day-to-day probates. So, Mrs. Jones from 52 Acacia Avenue has passed away, sadly. And she's got, 3 or 4 kids who are in charge with dealing with that estate.
Yeah.
And it all starts off quite nice. But then when you start talking about numbers and how much the house is worth, you watch one by one a switch in their head. And they then start realising that this money's quantifiable and they're getting a piece of it. And then the infighting starts. And then the calls start coming. So you start negotiating offers on a house or bungalow that's quite sought after in an area. And then they'll start phoning you saying, do you reckon we can get 5-10 grand more? I just want an extra little bit. And you're like, this is your dead mum's estate. Like, we've got a really nice first time buyer or, an elderly couple that really needs a bungalow. And we've already gone over asking price. Like, why are you trying to push it for a little bit more? Because it's their personal greed. It's not. So I'm not saying everyone's like that, but certainly a lot of the cases I dealt with with probate were like that. And you watch people change through that transaction.
Yeah, well, they do say that about money, don't they? That it will reveal, because I think I'm more a believer of it does corrupt, but more than anything, it just reveals what kind of a person you are if you are driven by possession or finance. But I guess you can see it from their perspective as well. If it's like some of the cases that you were clearly dealing with, that's probably more money up front than they've ever seen in their lives. So
yeah,
I guess you can see it from that perspective.
100%. And I totally understand it. I totally understand that everyone wants to get the most for their asset, or they obviously want to negotiate the hardest that they can. But there is a line where it no longer becomes business and it becomes personal greed. And you see that line from their behavior and their body language when they start talking to you about pushing it just that extra bit further. Yeah. And estate agents have got, like, in terms of negotiation, they know where the line is. If they push that buyer too hard, that transaction's either going to collapse and it's going to fall through, within 2 to 3 months' time, or the buyer's just going to walk away, and then you've got to then try and remarket the property, and you've got to try and get more offers on. But they've already set the vendors already set their expectations quite high in terms of what they want to achieve. So it's, the longer it's on the market, the harder it is to sell and achieve that figure.
So if I asked you, is there anything that you liked about the job or anything that you miss about the job, would you say marketing? And that's where you sort of found yourself? Or is there any aspect of working in real estate that you did quite enjoy?
Yeah, I loved it all. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I say that the British public and the interactions that I had were extremely difficult, and they were. There were some absolute horror cases that I dealt with. But on the whole, generally dealing with people, becoming the local property expert for that area and people recognising you, was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'd get messages on Facebook, every single week from people I used to go to school with, from relatives, asking me about houses that they were looking at. And I loved being that dependable person that people could reach out to. I'd also say that, the marketing is one aspect of it, but I think what really gets overlooked is the level of camaraderie within a high street branch. Those individuals that you work with day in and day out, and the bonds that you form with those people, because you are dealing with an extremely difficult job in an extremely difficult market, with people with extremely high expectations. Yeah. And that binds you together as a group of people. And I absolutely loved that. The levels of banter that we had, it was gallows humor that was in that branch. And yeah, I miss those days, like, definitely. Still thinking about them in terms of the stuff we got up to. It was great fun.
That's cool. So your introduction to marketing, did that just come straight? Was it just simply like hands-on learning as you go? Yeah, starting with the socials. So what would you say your extent of, like, how much marketing knowledge would you say you gained from that role?
Not a lot. I gained an interest in marketing from estate agency, but I would say estate agents should be marketers or should be totally focused on marketing, but actually what they're more focused on is the sales element. And I mean this generally as a whole, because the sales element is going into the living room and convincing that person to come onto the market with them. And then the element is of a sales negotiator is then negotiating a deal, answering those questions, making the person feel good about the property so that they get that warm feeling when they come into it on first impression. So the marketing experience that I gained from my time in estate agency was very limited. I handled the social media. I gained up little tricks, but until you throw yourself into something, that's when you really start to learn what it's all about. So when I left estate agency and really took it seriously and started trying to self-teach marketing, self-learn marketing, that's where I really picked up a lot of interesting stuff.
I think it's the best way to learn. It's how I got into it. So I started with, the skill set I had was, I was always interested in film, photography, creative endeavors, basically. Yeah. That was what I could sell. But I realized, the first project I sold was a video, and I recognized that they're not buying the video. I think I said this to you when we first met. So it just naturally evolved into that. But the best way to learn, I think, from marketing as well, because you can go through it, I'm sure you've done the same, the books, the podcasts, the YouTube videos, or conversations with other professionals. there's no better way to learn it than just try it, because the theory on do this, it's like social media for one example, follow all of these steps and this should lead to growth, doesn't always work out like that. And the best way to do it is just get into it, because like with trying to start a business, they say there's more value in the failures, and fail as quickly as you can. I would say that's the same in marketing, really, because you can do everything right on paper, but then when it comes to actually the execution of it, you've then got to figure out, really use your intuition on why is this not working as it should? How do we leverage this better?
Yeah.
That's what I've enjoyed about it. I think it's just constantly problem solving, forcing yourself to learn. So it's something I enjoy the most about like what I try and do is how do we make this work better?
Yeah, 100%. And I think marketers are really guilty of not remembering the basics. So we like to create extremely creative campaigns. We get a kick out of how far we can take this in terms of, the impression that we're giving to our audience. But a lot of the time we do forget the basics in terms of we're not the customer. We need to be playing into the psychology of the customer.
True.
And, in terms of whether it's our copy, whether it's our digital assets, whatever we're putting out on socials, it's really important that we remember that, and you just don't know what's going to work. But that's the beauty of marketing, is that you get that space to be able to try something. And if it flops, I mean, this is what I always say with social media, if it flops, no one's going to see it because the algorithm's not going to carry it. So therefore you can just try again tomorrow or try again in a couple of hours and crack on.
But that's like a double-edged sword though, isn't it? Because that's what causes a lot of people to hesitate, because they're up in their own mind thinking, oh, it's terrible, I don't like it. So it stops you from posting it. But it's like, even if you post something, you put it out, there's so much new content being uploaded every single day. It's like people see it for a minute and then it's gone. That's it. And even it, like, you can obviously go back, there's still a record of it. But that's the challenging thing with it, isn't it? Where you've just got to do it and you've just got to be consistent and figure out what works best. Because I think hesitation is the main thing that leads to, like, inaction is the only thing that's really against you when you're trying to market.
That's 100%.
Just post and obviously be considerate, because like you said, I think this is what I enjoy about it as well. I think everyone should have some level of education on human psychology, but certainly when you're trying to, because it's all story-based narrative, right? It's trying to, what value does this have to someone else? I think that's the most interesting thing about all of it, because it's not about what creative thing are we making, or like how are we funneling this traffic, what do we want them to do, but just trying to understand, like, from someone else's perspective, why does this matter to them? I think that's definitely what I find most interesting. Is why I enjoy interviewing people, is like learning from people as well, and try and get a perspective on all of these different things.
Yeah, definitely. You have to value the attention span of the individual that you're trying to market to. But I think that's where algorithms fail, is that you will never be able to predict entirely the unpredictability of the human consciousness in terms of what they'll like 1 minute and what they won't like the next minute. So, for example, if I'm doom scrolling on TikTok, it might be conspiracy theories about pyramids in ancient Egypt 1 minute, or it might be, watching someone renovate their home, a stately home that they're renovating it, 1 minute. So you can never predict what is going to be in someone's perspective in terms of what they find interesting at that moment, unless you give it a go and you are filling up the content and making sure that it's available for people to find.
It's true. I guess you can't really predict what's ever really going to go viral, what's going to be the next trend, how long is it going to last, because I'm sure people would love to be able to know all of that. You could make a killing if you could predict where things were going to go. But it's I think it's what's probably so exciting about social media, why people follow it, because they're looking for that next thing, that trend that people want to jump onto. Because it is weird, it's wacky, but it's exciting at the same time.
Well, that's an interesting point that you bring up about virality on social media. And I think going viral, I probably sound bitter because I've never gone viral, but it's massively overrated. Because if you think from a property perspective, the reason that you would go viral is, if you're a property developer, is so that you could attract enough people either to buy your properties or to invest in the development that you're doing.
That's one outcome though, isn't it? But if you're going viral, it's not necessarily because of the outcome that you set, because unless you've got really good product and like it's a big viral project, like from an estate agent's perspective, why might you go viral? Something you said that was controversial, a funny video you've made. The virality is obviously the traffic, but then how do you leverage that to your advantage?
100%. And then there comes this whole process of having to qualify each individual lead. Now, if you're a high street estate agency with 6 people working there and you only cover 5 postcode areas, but you've got 1 million views on your thing and you're getting all these inquiries, then it's not really going to help you that much. You've got that's a lot of time management to sift through that. What I'm noticing a lot of brands do at the moment, and this is really, really interesting, is that if you look at someone like Barclays as a bank, they've obviously got many different products and many different services. So Barclays will have, first-time buyer mortgages. They will have, more experienced mortgages. They may potentially have development finance, and then they'll have the investment arm of their bank, which will attract a whole different kind of market. Then they'll also be doing current accounts, credit cards, all that sort of stuff. And all those individual products will be aimed at different markets for different needs. Now, originally, what the strategy on social media was to try and go viral with one individual business account where they could basically attract enough people and get enough engagement on the one post. But if you imagine Barclays Bank are going to be posting, they could post effectively 1 million times a day with so many different bits of information and different bits of content of each different product. But they're just trying to cast the net too wide. So now what they're doing is they're creating individual company accounts for specific niche markets where the audience will be a hell of a lot smaller, but the conversion between the amount of people that see it versus like and comment on that post because of how relevant it is should be higher.
Yeah.
So the ratio should be higher, which means that the quality of the content that's going out is reflected in how many people are seeing that versus how many people are actually liking and commenting on it or clicking on the link X, Y, and Z. And that's really interesting because it means that there's going to be easier ways to find the kind of content that you're looking for if everyone's going so niche.
Absolutely. But I think that's a good point that you've made, that I guess more experienced people have maybe learned this, but there's that misconception, I think, of like you need millions of views to really get returns from it. But there's like really successful businesses niche down hard, and they don't need everyone to see it. They just need a really select few. When they've understood it perfectly and they've managed to reach their correct target market effectively, they can make all the money that they wanted to make from really small visibility.
Yeah, bang on, Dan. That's exactly it.
So what was your brother's background? Because you said you were both unemployed, and that's what, or at least that was the catalyst that triggered you to make that decision. Did he have similar experiences to you in property?
Yeah. So David basically did his A-levels, did really well in his A-levels, and the next step for him was to go off to university. But David wasn't totally sure about what he wanted to do. So he decided quite early on that he was going to have a gap year. So he was, he wasn't necessarily going to go traveling to Thailand and find himself, but he's definitely not that sort of bloke. But he was just going to take a year out where he was going to earn a bit of money before he went off to university, get some life experience, and then have another crack at it and see what course or what degree was going to suit him best. Now, I was having a conversation over lunch with my boss at the time in the estate agency, who he'd gone to university, he'd done started on one course or one degree, and then within a few months decided that wasn't for him, and then had to change halfway through and go on to another course. So I think it hit a bit of a chord with him. And he turned around to me and said, well, if David's not doing anything for the next 12 months, why doesn't he come and work with us? We've got space for him. I don't know how well you get on with David, but he could shadow you the same way you shadowed me. you could teach him the ropes, see how he gets on. We'll pay him, obviously, what we'd normally pay a sales negotiator. And hopefully he'll have a nice time doing it the same way you did. And I said, you know what, fair enough. That sounds like a decent idea. So I went home that night and spoke to David, and David was like, yeah, great. Because it meant he didn't have to get his CV out there and start looking for a job. He was quite happy with that. And David went through the same sort of experience that I did. Within, a couple of months, he absolutely fell in love with it. Driving around town, seeing all these different properties, understanding what can go wrong with a property. And despite, as we touched on earlier, some of the negative interactions, he really held on to the positive interactions that he was having with people across his sort of patch, if you like. So that then decided that when it came round for David applying for the university the following year, decided to make a decision that he didn't want to do that anymore, and that he actually really wanted to pursue a career in property. So me and David have actually worked together at 4 different estate agents. Okay. We've not killed each other yet. But yeah,
How does that happen? Like 4 different, did you both go in and interview together? Or you can use that?
Imagine that scene from Step Brothers where they're both in for the interview.
You're all there and you took sin or Bilan?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, no, it wasn't like that, I can assure you. So basically what would happen is that I'd get offered another job, either being paid more or, better hours or whatever it was, or a different area within a estate agency. And then I would pursue that, and I would find a new role with somewhere else, whether it was a promotion or whatever. And I'd have a great time doing it. And then I think David would see me somewhere else, and obviously maybe the culture wasn't necessarily as good, which is why I left. So he might want to come and join me. So a lot of nepotism involved, I'll be straight up. If I'd moved somewhere and David fancied a change, then it was, I would have a word and see. We did that a couple of times, and then David also did me a favour. So I mentioned to you that I left the country for a year, doing a bit of travelling. When I came back, I didn't have a job. First person I spoke to was David, and David actually got me involved in somewhere else. So yeah, it's a bit of to and fro, but I think that the benefit of doing that is that there is no one on earth that I trust more to go in and do a job and absolutely nail it.
Yeah.
So when I put David in as a recommendation, I'm giving them my absolute word that I know David is going to do an amazing job. And so far, every recommendation that I've given for David and David's job, he's absolutely succeeded at, which is why when we launched UK Homes Network, there was no one else that I wanted to start this business with, because I knew I could rely on him. I knew how we both worked, not only as brothers on a personal level, but also from seeing him day after day at work. I know what his strengths are, how he deals with people. We're very much yin and yang. So I'm Liam. I'm the front man out there making all the noise. We're a bit of attitude. And then David's in the back writing all the songs and actually making us actually look good. So yeah, it's really interesting dynamic, but it does work.
So you're both in a situation where you've got a bit of time on your hands. What led to that decision, that thought? Where did it come from of we want to do this? Because, of all the business models that someone could look at themselves, because you come out of what sounded like a very successful career, you knew what you were doing, you had that expertise, you could have, if you wanted to, maybe you would just set up your own real estate agent.
Yeah.
What stopped you where you thought, you know what, let's do something different? Because there's obviously a lot of money in social media networks, but it's also because it's not the same as any other sort of business model where necessarily you could have so many different Instagrams, let's say, or a high street social media branch. What led to that decision to get you there?
So I'd done something similar in my previous role before I've been made redundant.
The community.
Yeah, the community. And I think actually talking to people and actually meeting them face to face,
there was never any negative feedback. It was always positive and really enthusiastic. The problem itself was the platform wasn't independent and it was an upsell. And the more and more I had conversations with people and I delved into it, there was a serious requirement for what we were doing. And the thing is with me is that I overthink to the nth degree. Like, I'm so self-critical and I analyze every situation, every which way possible to analyze for risk. And in my head, all I was getting was positive feedback, and the risks that I foresaw, I'd been able to navigate in my previous role and knew how to overcome them. So when we came to launch UK Homes Network, I had a really clear blueprint of how I wanted to do this. Now, that's not to say things haven't changed, because initially when we launched, we launched with a subscription model. And we were much more styled to a property networking app. Whereas now we have completely changed the business model and actually changed the way the app operates. So it is now a full social media platform within its own right. And that was the change that we needed to make. So over that journey, there have been sort of, I mean, you've had it launched in your own business. There's days where you literally don't want to get out of bed and that you are completely depressed and like, is this ever going to work? Yeah. But I don't know whether you found this. Every time you get one of those moments, there's something within half an hour that changes your perspective on it and goes, no, you're actually doing the right thing here. Keep going. And I had that the whole way through. There was just like, either customer would phone me up and say, oh, Chris, I've just found the app. This is amazing. And you go, oh, shit, that's exactly what I needed. And those little moments have just kept me pushing me that little bit further, keep going, keep going, keep going. So, yeah, it's a radical idea. And it is, we're not saying we're going to change the world overnight. Certainly on day one, I thought I was going to naively, but then you have a wake-up call and realize what it's really about, running your own business. But so far today, everything has moved in the right direction. All the stats that we've got for the app, the amount of engaged users are telling us that this market really needs what we're doing.
Well, talk me through that, because that's what I'm curious about. Yeah, as well. Came off the back of positive responses you would get from a community you'd already built. What is it like? So let's say I'm a property developer or just anyone in property. What's the argument for going into this niche market in the form of your application versus going all of the other traditional or mainstream methods? Like, what is it that pushed you into really thinking there's something to this, there's a viable business here?
Yeah, well, there's two parts. So the first one is, what is the requirement for a property professional being on social media? Because it is massively underutilized by property. So the first part of this would be, you are either looking to promote your business or services, you're either looking to assemble a power team, or you're looking for property investment or looking for more deals to come down the track. So off the bat, there's 4 things there that you immediately want to use social media for. I'd say probably the next part is, what's different to UK Homes Network over using a traditional platform like LinkedIn, where there is a lot of noise. The most incredible stat that I've learned over the last 18 months is that only 10 to 15% of your connections on LinkedIn actually see your posts. So if you imagine you've got 100 connections, only 15 of those are actually going to see what you posted. And that's because the algorithms prioritize paid content and viral content over you basically asking for a recommendation or looking for help or, all that kind of stuff. So you're already onto a losing battle. Now with UK Homes Network, it's based on a chronological order. So the more you post, the more you get seen. We don't have algorithms dictating who should see your post, when they should see your post.
So you're directly, because but as far as like the algorithm for the other ones, there's obviously, as you said, there's the money aspect of it, but there's a little, by the sounds of it, you're prioritizing more of what the algorithms do, which is you're rewarding those who actually put the consistent effort into it more so. So if I'm posting irregularly, I'm just naturally not going to get seen more regardless of chronological order. Yeah. If I posted consistently throughout that time, I've got a better chance of that being seen as that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we're not saying spam the platform, because that's just going to piss people off, quite frankly. But yeah, the biggest part of social media is the consistency. Now, traditionally on platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook, it can take 12 to 18 months to establish a personal brand on those platforms. It's a long time to get an audience engaged in what you're doing and regularly seeing your content, liking it, commenting or sharing it. Now, we've calculated that based on our current engagement rate and the amount of people that are coming back to our platform and actually seeing the posts that are coming into our platform, we can get that down to just under 3 months of creating a personal brand within our platform. Which is, if you think of the biggest objection as to why property developers or property investors don't use social media, it's because it's time consuming.
And we can't see the return.
Exactly. So if you then said to a property developer, right, you want to create a personal brand, fantastic. It's going to take you 12 to 18 months to do it on LinkedIn.
And it's going to cost X amount. We've got to post this frequently.
Yeah. Whereas if you do it in the UK Homes Network, you haven't got to become a digital marketing expert overnight. You've just got to value your audience and make sure that your posts are high quality and they're written well. And then you could actually start converting that audience into quantifiable results for you within 3 months versus 12 to 18 months. What would you rather do?
So within your platform, because I liked what you said, that property professionals tend to just want to focus on networking with other property professionals. So what would you say your platform is most geared towards as the best outcome right now? Because am I correct in saying if you're trying to reach like a B2C market, the general public, it's not really not going to start. So what would you say would you say there's any certain roles within property or industries that's currently suited better? Like if I'm going into it, what kind of return should I really be aiming for?
Right, so there's a couple of things there. I mean, probably the biggest market that we have using the UK Homes Network at the moment is 40% property developers, mostly SMEs. Then the other 40% is landlords and property investors. And then the remaining 20% is professional services. But the professional services actually make up 80% of the noise in the platform because they've got stuff to sell and they've got stuff to promote. But that's not to say that the property developers are actually our highest returning audience to UK Homes Network. So although they're not posting as much, they are consuming way more content than the other sectors or the other roles that we have in there. So I'd say if you're a property developer, based on the evidence that we've got from the data points, this is probably the most interesting social media platform for you. But generally, what I'd say is that if you're looking to come into UK Homes Network and you're looking to say you've got 20% off bricks or 30% off planning services, you're not gonna do very well. And that's the same for other social media platforms unless you're paying for paid advertising. If you're in there to help educate, create connections, establish relationships, and share some knowledge and expertise in terms of what you do, you'll fly.
Right. So the same as just about any kind of marketing effort. If you're going too heavy on the sale, it's not going to work. But so let's say I'm a property developer. Am I getting value out of the services I'm going to need for certain things? So if I'm a developer, could I get value out of I need to source the land or I need to sell something? What would you say is the kind of ratio there?
Yeah, so in terms of a property developer, the majority of them would probably be looking for land or looking for help with planning, or they're looking to consume information around sort of certain things that are affecting their development at any one time. So from the education side, there's lots of resources in there from other members that are sharing that kind of content. Now, one of the things that I realised was that a property developer will typically go to a land agent if they're not sourcing off market or using platforms like Searchland for their land. they will typically go to a land agent, and a land agent, if they've got, you know, a good reputation within the industry, they will typically work with about 10 to 15 developers, ones that they know that they can supply land to on a regular basis. They create a really fantastic relationship with them, and they constantly feed them with great land. In return for those land agents then being able to market the new build properties once they're done. So there's a nice little ecosystem of consistent business. Unfortunately, if you're dealing specifically with SME property developers, there's a good chance that a lot of those property developers will already have sites that are already done, and you know they're either going through planning or they've got capital finance tied up, so they can't move on to the next project. So as a land agent, you're sat with a plot of land that you don't know what to do with. Now, the most viable option, or the quickest route, would be stick it on Rightmove, open it up, and see how you get on. Problem is, you stick it on Rightmove, every man and his dog, or every woman and his dog, who thinks that they could be a property developer now gets in touch about that piece of land because they don't know what they want to do with it, but they know it might retain some value. So the land agent then has to filter through, you know, so many inquiries about this plot of land, and typically, you know, 10% of them might be worth actually having a conversation with. So what we've done is we've basically created exclusive groups within the platform called Land Match, House Match and Commercial, where our premium members can go in there and they can share plots of land, or they can share investment properties, or commercial properties that could be right for commercial conversions. And it's hidden behind our premium membership so that they know that everyone coming into that group is motivated and looking to purchase or looking to sell. And in the industry, we have a really bad problem with deal sources at the moment that are charging $2,000 for a Rightmove link. And when you look at the deal doesn't actually stack. Now, our premium membership is only £9.79 a month, but even a tenner is enough to put those less reputable deal sources off coming into the platform and sharing their deals. So we've kind of navigated that. So for a property developer, you're happy to spend £10 a month to come in and to see sort of deals being posted. And if it's not one for you, it's maybe one you can collaborate and share with, you know, one of your other colleagues or someone you work with closely in the industry.
Okay, so we spoke about this before as well. Do you think, because I guess your community that you built was directly telling you what they were looking for, what was missing in the market? Because there's so much noise around property as far as, like, I think a lot, it can obviously make you money, can be a really good passive residual, which obviously then oversaturates the market in some respects, deal sources being one of the worst from what I've heard. So you've taken that concept, essentially refined it down and funneled or filtered it in a way that scares off some of the noise so that you're just left from good quality. Do you think this kind of concept could work for other industries? And what kind of industry has any come to mind that you maybe thought, well, we might step into that with, but you can take what we've made here and, oh, you have.
Yeah. So there's two industries that work very similar to the way the property does, but it's just not the same product. And I'm not talking about cars or sort of vehicles or, you know, sort of big fixed assets. There are two industries that we've identified that work exactly the same. So I think from my experience of working with PropTech companies, the first step is that they tend to go to Australia or go to the US in terms of expanding their business. We are property professionals by nature, but there is an opportunity to potentially look at other industries around the UK that would benefit from what we're doing and provide them. And, you know, maybe slowly chip away at the monopoly that LinkedIn has had on the professional networking sector online for 10 to 15 years.
Well, now that I'm really thinking about it, because there's people that obviously make good money out of one example, like a Discord server. Because I think if you build community, and there's some reason for people to go there, whether that's literally just community and conversation with other people that have the same interests, or some kind of educational thing where you're paying something to get exclusive access to. What you've done in a sense is that, but you've expanded it in a way where it's more accessible, in a way where you can post and really build a story-based narrative around it, as compared to just posting a message and you're almost anonymous. You've built it in a way where it is almost a bit of a, yes, it's a community, but it's also a bit of a marketplace. It's also a bit of, I guess in a way, a showroom. You've given a way for people to keep that exclusivity, knowing that they're going more directly to the people that they need to see their message. But you've done it in a way where it's more interesting. It's not as, I guess, boring as siloed, because there's more things that people can do through it instead of just putting their message out into the noise of everyone else talking in the same community.
Yeah.
So, because this was the thing that interested me immediately when I met you, because you're the first person I've met that's built a social media platform. But immediately what stood out from that concept was, that's really interesting. What clearly shows with businesses niching, you can't sell to everyone. You've got to focus your message and your market. Where else could you expand this concept into?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, so there's a lot going on in the community front at the minute. Schools popped up. We've got, various other different platforms that are all over the shop. And like you rightly said, they are only ever promoting the one educator or the one event or the one podcast, and they seem to be doing a great job, but they haven't valued the fact that humans don't have that attention span where they can stick to the one content producer for too long. I mean, if I look at a content producer that I like on TikTok, I'll probably have a 2-week lifespan with that individual in terms of how much I'm consuming their content. I get bored and move on to the next. So the subscription model is really high in terms of churn for those individuals. Whereas what we're doing is we're inviting the entire industry in to come in and actually share knowledge and find different resources and learn something about different areas of the market, because no one really sticks to one strategy. So, for example, if you're into HMOs, potentially the next step up is to start building your own. So I'm very much a believer that the industry is a spectrum. So you start out right at the start, which is your deal sources, your rent to rents. Then you might get into buy to lets, maybe do a flip. Then you look at HMOs, service accommodation. Then from that, you may look at building your own. And then the scale from doing 1 or 2 units a year right up to potentially 500 is a huge, vast gap between that. And you can't just jump straight from one to the next. There needs to be learning and meeting the right people. And those guys that you've accrued doing HMOs with won't necessarily be your power team for doing your first development. So the ongoing cycle of networking and learning and sharing knowledge is where our platform comes into its own, because we have all those resources available where it's not difficult to find. You haven't got to negotiate algorithms and manipulate the algorithms to find the right content producers for that, because they're all available within the platform.
Do you have a vision long term because by the sounds of it, you've at least given some thought to expanding into other niches. What are is there anything else that the community's crying out for to bring into the features?
Yeah, so we're working on bringing some high-profile influencers into the platform at the moment. I think that's really going to give us the accreditation or the validation from the rest of the market in terms of what we're doing. We're working with some incredible people that are well-renowned within the industry to come into the platform. So that's sort of first on the list. We've obviously launched our live event, which is going to be, I don't know when this goes out, but it'll be on Wednesday, June the 18th. This is a shameless plug, I do apologise. So yeah, guys, if you can get a ticket, it's £15, only £15, and you get 2 free drinks and free food all night at the Indian Brewery in Birmingham. Now I've got that out of the way. Yeah.
That's the sound like, don't it?
Yeah, so that's the shameless plug. So it's going to be a fantastic evening. We've got a capacity of 300. We're going to hit that really easy. So people need to be quick if they want to get a ticket. But that kind of accommodates the not only the connections that have been built in the app, but also the face-to-face interactions is going to support that and really build that community element even further.
So that's stuff we've got going on in the immediate future, but the long-term future is we want the politicians, the decision makers for our industry to come into the app. So traditionally, when you go to, big conferences, you'll see maybe a panel of the head of Loaning Up or the housing minister, and they'll come on and they'll give it the usual spiel. Well, we've actually invested 3.6 billion this year, and we've got changes in planning coming down the road. Don't do any questions, piss off in their ministerial car, and then you never hear from them again until their latest press release in the trade press. So what we want to do is we want to invite those individuals into the platform and actually have an ongoing dialogue and actually listen and share with the wider property industry in terms of how their decisions basically affect the amount of house building and the amount of properties that are available within the UK. So the mission is to be the collective voice for the industry. Now, we're not a lobby group. There's some guys that are doing a fantastic job of that. But what we are is we are creating the platform for those conversations to happen in a more consistent and ongoing dialogue. So that's where the real mission is for this.
What kind of form would you see that taking? Would that be these people of influence having, at the very least, their own profile is maintained? But is there anything else, like as far as a vision of how that message is best communicated?
Yeah, we've got webinars, live streaming, all available within the platform. But I think even just making the first point of contact, so posting consistently or actually sharing directly with the industry in terms of what they've got planned, or asking for feedback in terms of what they want. No, they don't necessarily have to do much with that feedback, but actually it would make us feel a lot better as an industry if we knew that they were listening and that they were taking that feedback on board. So yes, absolutely, we want them to create a profile within the platform and actually post and let us know what they're up to and what help is available to maybe an SME property developer or a landlord that's feeling quite under the cosh at the minute in terms of the renters reform bill or whatever else is going on.
Well, I guess that what I was looking for there was whether or not there was like live feeds, webinars, because that's obviously a really useful tool, especially if you can make that an exclusive thing where the people of influence are speaking directly to the audience.
Yeah.
It's exclusively through your app. That'd be really something.
Yeah, so we do this nearly every week. We have a webinar. And we invite some really high-profile guests from around the industry onto the webinar. A couple of months into when we first started, we had George Coucher come on, who was the head of town planning for Stratford-upon-Avon District Council, and he was incredible. I think he rubbed a few developers up the wrong way, but actually having that ongoing dialogue, the feedback from that webinar was fantastic, and we'd love to see more of that. So yeah. If there is any town councillors, heads of planning, MPs, ministers, give me a shout. We'd love to have you on.
So let's turn into webinar was one way, but like almost like your own little podcast as well.
Yeah,
exclusively through your own platform as well.
Yeah, we have looked into the podcast side of it. Unfortunately, I don't have the time at the moment to negotiate that as well. But we would love to venture into that market, definitely.
Do you do all your webinars just like through a year? Or?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so.
Yeah. It's really difficult to get guests on and get them booked in and make sure they actually turn up. Whereas we're a webinar that there's no excuse really; they need to be there so that our audience find that really reliable and make sure that when we say we're launching live at 10 a.m. on a Friday, they know that guest is going to be that.
Well, from experience, already. Like to do one thing, trying to do everything else you're doing, and then try and invite guests. But then you've got to piece the thing together. So if you're not paying someone to do it, that's extra another chunk out of your time that you probably don't want to lose. These events, the first one is coming up very soon. You spoke to me a little bit about how you want to expand that as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So. We weren't going to do live events when we initially set out the UK Homes Network, just because I'd run them before and I know how difficult they are. But we started working with someone and they had massive experience in terms of doing events. And they really recommended that we did one. And
helped us, mentored us, guided us through the process to the point where we're launching UK Homes Network Live. So that'll be our first live event. As I say, we're hoping for about 300 people there. It's going to be really great. But Birmingham, although it's in the centre of the country, and some might argue the centre of the world, is not necessarily accessible for those up in Leeds or Manchester or down in Devon or, down in the southeast. I know, particularly speaking to quite a few Londoners recently, they really need quite a cash incentive to leave the M25. We obviously, we are a national platform. We want to be inclusive of the whole property industry all around the UK. So David is currently working in the background to secure venues for events. We're going to do another one before the end of the year, and then next year we're going to do a few. But the point is that not only they're not going to be your standard Hilton conference room. So the venue we've got for Birmingham is a converted steelworks, which is now converted into a brewery. And the venue is incredible. It's still got the cranes in there from like where it used to lift the girders and stuff like that. So it's incredible venue. And that's the kind of tone we want to set for this, is that we're not just doing your standard run-of-the-mill property events where we have speakers on that basically talk at you for 45 minutes. We want to have the total focus on the social element, the connections, which is why included in the ticket price, we obviously give the 2 free drinks and the food so that the people can make it into a bit more of an evening, feel a little bit more relaxed in their environment and actually have a conversation with people that they might not otherwise have. If you're stood there with a pint in hand and a slice of pizza in the other, you're less likely to start the conversation with, so what do you do? You're more likely to start the conversation, how are you, mate? You all right? I don't think we've met before. And that's the kind of environment that we're trying to build with these live events.
So I know you got sponsors for the event, but no speakers whatsoever.
No, so the sponsors will be able to exhibit there. So we're going to have little exhibition stands around. We're not getting into the exhibition space, but we want to make sure that the sponsors are able to interact quite clearly with the audience members that we have there, and those audience members feel invited to come and have a conversation. And the sponsors that we have, we hand selected them because it was really important to us that the sponsors that are there are able to help and give value on the day. So, for example, we've got, Help Build, who are a fantastic organisation at estimating costs and actually getting into the nitty-gritty of the construction of a development so that people can understand exactly where the pain points are. Then we've also got like Planning Geek, who are an incredible organisation. Ian Walmsley, well renowned within the industry, puts out loads of fantastic content around planning and is a real authority for planning in the UK. So those kind of sponsors are going to be there where they can actually really help add value to the audience and people can come over, have a conversation with them. So no speakers, but there will be lots of education available if they need it.
Nice. Well, I know I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to go down really well. I'm really looking forward to how you expand this to other parts of the country as well in the future, because I think it's a nice way to round it off, right? Because you said the platform almost started out as like a digital networking to start with, but I think that's kind of what people need in a way, especially if you're niching it. Like you want to meet people, you want a reason to connect, which that's certainly something the other platforms don't do, at least formally as an organization. You can of course do it yourself. But I think that's a really nice way to really round it off. You create a place where people can post exclusively to their industry, but now you're also encouraging and inviting people to now kind of meet and mingle. So I know you're early, it's still fairly early doors with the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think you've really got something of big potential there.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time there. And as I say, looking forward to it.
Oh, I've loved being here. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to seeing you at the event.
Well, I think I made a bit of a habit of, so I'll do it. But we normally conclude with a bit of a fist bump.
Oh, fantastic. Go for that. I'll have that. Yeah.
Nice.